Good day, dedicated pilots. This is video number 2 of lesson number 1 on radio procedures. This video is following the quiz number 1 that you just took. And as always, these lectures are recorded in one take. So if I make any mistakes or flub my words, you can just pretend it's an in-person lecture. So let's get started and I can share my screen. Okay, play from current slide. Let's do it. So now it's time to see what services are available and how each are different. This is a definition that's put out by ICAO, and you can find it in the document 4444 of the PANS ATM. And the definition of air traffic service is a generic term meaning variously: flight information service, alerting service, air traffic advisory service, air traffic control service, area control service, approach control service, or aerodrome control service. This is a very easy breakdown list of all of the services available to you, and they're divided really into 3 different sections: control, advice, and simply information. So varying degrees of how much authority that the person on the other end of the radio has. And if you look at the cheat sheet on the slide, you'll know who it is and of course what you call them. We talked about call signs in the last video section, and of course air traffic control has their own call signs as well. For example, if you're on the ground, let's say at the Medicine Hat Airport in Alberta, then it is a flight service station. You can find that on the bottom half of that cheat sheet. They're an advisory service, so they give you advice on what to do. They do not command you on what to do, and you would call them radio. So Medicine Hat Radio. If you're at the Calgary International Airport on the ground, then you would either be talking to Calgary Ground or Calgary Tower, depending on where you are and what you're about to do. So let's get over some basic definitions. The objectives of air traffic control services, as stated in the NAV Canada handout, and in the ICAO Annex 1.1, are to prevent collisions between aircraft, on the maneuvering area and obstructions in that area. Note that this objective does not include the apron, and air traffic services in general is not intended to prevent collisions with terrain. The objective of air traffic service is to expedite and maintain an orderly flow of air traffic. They are providing advice and information useful for the safe and efficient conduct of flights. They notify appropriate organizations regarding aircraft in need of search and rescue aid and assist such organizations as required. The air traffic control service, which means those are going to be the people on the other end of the radio that tell you what to do and you have to do it unless safety is involved. Those people and the air traffic control service is established to accomplish the first 3 objectives, really. While the first and third are universally applicable to all air traffic control units, the second one is only relevant to aerodrome control units. And the 4th objective is covered by flight information service, and the last one is subject of the alerting service. As seen from the definition, there is a 4th type of ATS, the advisory service. No specific objectives are defined for this type of service, and it's considered a temporary measure to facilitate the smoother transition from flight information service to air traffic control. The level of service provided depends on the airspace class and the air traffic air traffic service unit. Now, if you have any confusion about airspace class, then I'd suggest you head over to the airspace lecture now. An air traffic control unit may provide air traffic control service. They can also provide flight information and alerting service, although the flight information service would normally be of lower priority. Any flight information service unit, however, will not provide air traffic control service. So essentially what this is saying is that an air traffic controller does everything. An advisory service can give advice and information, and an information service only gives information. It's pretty obvious. Now we're going to start with a tower only because it is the most recognizable item out there. There's lots of different places I could have started this presentation, but because almost everybody recognizes a tower, we're going to start there. And inside this one building, at the very, very top, with all of the slanted windows, it's called the cab, And that cab seats up to 3 or 4 different positions in the air traffic control, okay? They can have the tower, you can have ground control, you can have clearance delivery, you can have airport information as well in the cab sometimes as well. So lots of different positions sit in that one building. However, there's it is possible, depending on staffing, depending on how much traffic is predicted, that one person can be all of those different positions as well. Okay, towers are always found at busier airports for obvious reasons. We need control when a whole bunch of airplanes get really close together around an airport for takeoff and landing. And there needs to be some tight procedures in there. Now, as a quick mention, a side note before we move on to the other services, I have spoken about the problems with the simplex radio system. Obviously, the tech exists where you can communicate in other ways, but implementing them, there's a lot of safety, there's a lot of red tape. It is possible for pilots in a 2-crew environment, not a single crew environment, to text the air traffic controllers. So a PDC, pre-departure clearance, is a text using the machine in the aircraft where you can text 15 minutes prior to your departure and get a whole bunch of information, and this eliminates the need for a controller to speak it all over the radio. Obvious safety factors here, and this technology is becoming more and more prevalent, so watch out for it, because we can all see how technology changes everything very, very fast. Okay, so back to our services. So we're going to jump from air traffic control, jump around a little bit to an advisory service. This picture is of the flight service station in Medicine Hat. It is important to note that even though this building has a cab, it's not necessarily a control tower, and not all flight service stations have a cab. It's just the one that's there. This is in Medicine Hat. Okay, at some airports with a lower density of traffic, pilots are responsible for maintaining a safe distance from each other, and control services are not provided. Airport advisory services may be provided by flight service specialists working at a flight service station, FSS, and at these airports, or via remote communication outlet, also known as an RCO. The services they provide include weather information, airport advisory services that would include traffic in the area, runway conditions, wind, altimeter, and other information required by the pilots. Flight service also help with vehicle control and emergency assistance. They can relay air traffic control clearances to IFR traffic and make suggestions to pilots, but they do not issue control or instructions. Okay. So my last question is, I just said in the video, what do they do? If you don't want to rewind and listen to it again, you can dive into the VFR Phraseology and Procedures Handbook by NAV Canada. What do you call them? You can head back a couple of slides and check out that cheat sheet. This is the beauty of video. Next, okay, we went from a tower all the way down to an uncontrolled advisory service. Now we're heading back up to terminal control. All right, terminal control is controlled airspace that is not around an airport. If you look at the picture here, you'll see my cursor moving. There's a little tiny cab or control tower down here around the airport. But your terminal control areas are going to be this upside down wedding cake that's all in the airspace around it. The purpose of this is to keep heavy control over aircraft that need it, but designate airspace so you're not doing it for every inch of Canadian airspace. There's a lot out there. It's not possible to control every inch. So we're gonna set up the airspace to control only very specific flight patterns. All right. In here, in these terminal control areas, you would call these people, I could make it head back to the cheat sheet, but it's going to be arrival or departure or terminal. Okay. Next, we have the area control center. So here's what the book says about area control centers. They provide control, obviously, and advisory, obviously, and alerting services for IFR and controlled VFR traffic. Air traffic controllers located at these centers across the country coordinate the safe, efficient, and orderly flow of air traffic as it travels across Canada. Each ACC is responsible for air traffic in a large section of Canadian airspace known as a flight information region. You will get the designations and the breakdowns of all of these words and these regions and the borders in your airspace video lecture. Each flight information region is divided into smaller sectors and assigned to controllers who know that airspace very well. They issue instructions and provide terminal clearances at certain airports. You call them center. Okay. So next, the Flight Information Service. We briefly touched on this when we talked about Medicine Hat, but a Flight Information Center are centralized air traffic service units responsible for providing pre-flight, en route, and flight information and VFR alerting service. Flight service specialists working at these centers are trained to interpret meteorological information and use this information to provide in-depth interpretive weather briefings and notice to airmen, also known as NOTAMs. They are also responsible for managing VFR flight plans and providing alerting service and coordination. So the words I used in the air traffic service here is flight service specialist. We did talk about that briefly when we talked about Medicine Hat, but these lovely people are typically located in the same building in the area control centers. They have desks similar to this, but sometimes they're located at uncontrolled airports in the flight service stations. It really depends. There's usually one per flight information region, and they have a very specific job over providing advisory at the airport. Like I already said, they are in-depth interpretive weather analysis briefings and notice to airmen. They control VFR flight plans and alerting services. So these are your en route guys. They also have their own frequency where you can contact them en route, check your maps. Okay, and last, but definitely not least, we have NAV Canada providing a specified flight information service in northern and remote areas, utilizing community aerodrome radio stations. This is CARS, not to be confused with CARS, which means the regulations of Canadian aviation regulations. These facilities provide aviation weather, communication service at designated sites in the Yukon and Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Northern Quebec, and along the James Bay coast. CARS facilities consist of met equipment or meteorological equipment for producing aviation surface weather observations, also known as METARs, and office space equipped with communications console for providing operational information to pilots. CARS operators provide aviation support in the form of air-to-ground communication, flight planning, aviation weather observation, and emergency response. Specialized flight service for northern and remote areas. Okay. Now we're getting into what a radio panel looks like. Okay. Volume and squelch will be discussed individually, but you must familiarize yourself with the radio in your aircraft prior to initiating communications. Set volume and squelch accordingly and listen briefly to the desired frequency. Ensure microphone or your boom mic that's right in front of your lips is positioned so that speech will be clear and continuous. And when ready to transmit, press the push to talk, firmly hold it down with constant pressure. And once you're finished your transmission, of course, release the push to talk. So if you look at the tiny video of me right now, we've got press it, talk, let it go. It's pretty simple. Ensure your headset is properly plugged into the correct jacks. That could cause some problems. There's two jacks. There's a listening jack, and a talking jack. So make sure it's correctly plugged in, or else you're going to have some communication problems. Now, volume should be pretty obvious. It's important for you to know that there is going to be a volume on your headset, whether it's right on the earmuffs itself, or if it's on a separate control device that's attached to the wires. So there's a volume on your headset, but there's also a volume on the audio panel. The picture here is of an audio panel. You'll notice on the far left side, under the round knob, it says pilot, and on the far right side, under the round knob, it says co-pilot. So those two volume and squelch knobs are for the individual positions. Not all audio panels look like this. I'm simply going to describe the difference between audio and squelch and what they do, but it is your job to get with your instructor and learn the audio panel in your airplane. I have flown many different types of airplanes, and it almost seems like every different airplane I'm in has a different type of audio panel, but they all have the same basic functions. Volume will turn up the volume of the incoming radio transmissions, not turn up the volume on your headset. It'll turn up the incoming radio transmissions. So anything that's from an air traffic control service or air traffic service or any other aircraft coming in, that's what the volume is for. Squelch is, if I could break it down into something very easy, it turns up the power and sensitivity of your boom mic, okay? So if you turn that squelch all the way up, it's gonna pick up everything. You're gonna get background noise, you're gonna get the person next to you talking, and everything is picked up in the power and sensitivity of your microphone. But if you turn the squelch way down, it takes a lot of volume and a lot of force from your voice to initiate the boom mic. So if your squelch is down, or the sensitivity of your mic, or when it comes alive, let's say, if your squelch is down, you have to almost scream at the microphone on your headset to get it to work. Therefore, playing with the squelch is important. Squelch way up, you can whisper, and it picks up everything because it's live and active all the time. Squelch way down, you have to scream at it to get it to work. All right, moving on. Next, good practices. These are important, please. So I'm going to list them all on the slide here, and then I'm going to say them individually. Okay. So listen on the frequency before speaking to avoid making a call while another aircraft is also transmitting. Think about and plan what you're going to say before beginning the transmission. After pressing the push to talk button, a slight pause before beginning to speak, and again when you are finished, ensures that your entire transmission will be heard and not cut off. Use a normal conversational tone and volume of speech. Keep calls brief using concise, standard phraseology. Remember that information being relayed may need to be written down, so speak slightly slower than normal during normal conversation. And to transmit no more than 3 ideas, which is a phrase, information, or instructions, at once. Only operational transmissions should be made, which means avoid general conversation. All right, now that I've read that in the way I need to, essentially listen to make sure that you're not going to step on anybody. If somebody else is talking on the radio, do not push down your mic. Because what that's going to do when their mic is pushed down and your mic is pushed down, it's going to cause a whole bunch of squealing and nobody hears anything. It's called being stepped on or stepping on somebody else. It's very bad form. Listen for the standard phrases so that when you get the standard phrases, you know when the other person is done talking. Okay? Think about what you're going to say before you say it. When you press the mic down, when you're ready, you know there's a space to talk and you know what you're going to say. You press down your push to talk. You pause for just a second. And then be aware of your tone. Be aware of your tone and volume and pace, and make sure that everyone can really understand what you're saying. Because if you run your words together, it's going to be very, very difficult to hear, especially if there's staticky or the signal is very weak. Be brief. Use your standard phraseology so that we can keep everything as safe as possible. And of course, pause again at the end so that people know when your transmission is done and you can make sure that everything was actually heard. Okay, a radio procedure is cyclical in nature. Okay, both people involved must state their request and intentions. They have to state their name. They have to listen for feedback and acknowledge the other person's response. And it's a loop that goes around and around. The listening portion of the cycle is just as important as the speaking portion. Careful listening may prevent errors from occurring. All right, some notes. State your call sign in each transmission. This allows air traffic control to confirm that the message or instruction or clearance was received and acknowledged by the intended aircraft. If you don't understand, you have to ask. Okay, it's pretty obvious. Next, here is the format. So, how to make a radio call. This format is the basic underlying format of every radio transmission you will ever make in every scenario, either controlled or uncontrolled or en route or at an airport or on the ground. This is the basic format. When we get into controlled environments, there will be a few tweaks to it, but if you learn and practice this right now, make it second nature, it's going to do amazing things for your confidence when you get onto the radio, get into the airplane for your first call. So here it is. It's going to be who you're addressing, who you are, where you are, and what you want to do. Like I said, little tweaks in the different environments, but this is the foundation of all of your radio calls. Let me give you an example. If I am flying from Calgary to Medicine Hat and my airplane is a Cessna 172 and the letters on my tail for my identifier are Foxtrot Kilo India Mike, and I'm en route and I'm just going to go land at Medicine Hat. Let's say I'm 10 miles southwest of Medicine Hat. This is what I would say. Medicine Hat radio. That's who I'm addressing. This is, that's who I am. Cessna 172, Foxtrot Kilo India Mike. I say Cessna 172 first to let people know that I'm not a Learjet, to let people know that I'm not something that's super fast, and you can get a basic idea of how fast I'm going. So Cessna 172, and then my airplane name, Foxtrot Kilo India Mike. Where am I? I'm 10 miles southwest of Medicine Hat at 6,500 feet. And what do I want? I'm inbound for landing. That's a basic format. It's really quite simple. We're going to be doing a lot of practicing. So now it's important. The radio procedure script that you were given in your file. So open your file named Generic Student Practice Script 1.0. If you open this document now, you can read along with the description. And this script will also be used in class. So the more you practice at home now, the more professional you'll be in class. All right, I'm going to shut down the video, but before, let's summarize everything. In this section, you have covered how to find the information on your own with reference materials. You'll have a brief history and evolution of communication in the aircraft, the organization of the frequency range, services available to pilots, and generic usage and phraseology. And our next section will cover in-depth scenarios and procedures. So now it's time for the live exercises and competency check. So this is the end of the first presentation. Ensure your live class is booked. In that class, you'll be expected to know all of the material in this presentation and study the NAV Canada VFR reference material. The competency check will involve you role-playing and participating in live practice situations. You may not move on to the next live lesson without a competency check. So just be aware that you will be expected to participate, right? Being confident on the radio is all about practice. Practice makes confidence. All right, I'll see you in section 2. Have a good time.